A few days ago, after I got roped into doing this, I went through the obituaries for 3 or 4 years, which you can do pretty easily from the magazine. Our class really had, some of them had really amazing lives and amazing careers. It's hard to, I'm not going to go through all of them or any of them really, but it's worth reading. So what I plan to do is talk about a couple of people who aren't with us anymore, and then go through, just call on people, perhaps just in the order you appear on my grid, which, warning you, Tim and Patty, you'll be first after I talk a bit. I don't see her here. Frankie McFarland was going to be here. I suppose I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my classmate, who was my wife for 25 years. She was Jan Veneziano. We were together at Reed and married for 25 years, and not married for 7 or 8. She died. And I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I told her son, to send an obituary. I told her sister too. I don't know what a divorced husband's supposed to say about his wife, but she was our classmate. She was certainly a better student than I was, and we had some good years. That having been said, I want to mention a couple of people, probably one that nobody knew, and two others that should be pretty well known. One of the people in our class, and the guy who played poker, was an ex-Marine called Tim Custer. He had a wife and kids. He served in Vietnam. He had some demons. It took him a while to overcome. And eventually he ended his life as a drug and alcohol counselor. But I liked him, and he was a guy with, when he was determined to do something, he didn't quit. Anyway, he wasn't too well known, and so I thought I'd mention him. And I was telling Carrie, there's another guy who, he and I didn't like each other very much, but hung around the newspaper, who was famous, Haywood Hale Broun, and I Googled him. His father was famous, his grandfather was famous. He wrote a novel, and he became a quadriplegic, wrote another novel, and it's really a remarkable life. And apparently he became, according to my friends from my class, became a much nicer guy after he was hurt. Then lastly, and then I'll quit talking and let everybody else talk, I want to mention somebody from the class of 73 who I thought was in my class. Paul Summerson was the editor of the Quest, I believe, our sophomore year. And I believe he was in charge of the yearbook, which is all pictures and no words, when we were seniors. And he went on apparently to a distinguished career, editing some well-known magazines and doing some other things. And those are all obituaries. There's somebody in our class who was a test pilot, and somebody who died, in a boating accident last year. There's a lot of interesting people in our class. And I thought I'd just mention those. And then Tim and Patty, I warned you, if there's somebody that you want to talk about, now's the time. You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
So I am not prepared. And I'm going to let Tim think about it for a minute while I just say that for me, because I was also the daughter of a Reed faculty member, and because we still live in Portland, in many ways, the deaths of faculty members for our former teachers have meant almost more to me than some of the people that I knew or didn't know very well at Reed. So Casper Locher, Ken Hansen, the people that weirdly I grew up with and then who became my teachers. Those are meaningful deaths for me, and those people were so influential for so many of us that I think about them a lot. The other person who isn't actually in our class year, Carolyn Locher, from class of 66, who died several years ago. She was the director of the alumni of the alumni department, and I actually worked for her for a while. So her passing was hard, particularly hard for me. And I think she brought a lot of new energy to the alumni office when it was sort of flagging a bit. So I think that we all owe her a debt of gratitude for that. So, and I'm going to stop babbling. So maybe Tim has somebody he wants to talk about.
I'm a bit caught off guard here because I thought I would watch and not really have to participate. But
It's not a
You don't have to
requirement. It's
participate.
well,
not
I do.
required by law.
I want to add to what Patty was saying because, of course, her father, Don McCrae, is one of the people that she didn't mention because of humility, I guess. But also the two Arthurs, Arthur Lay and Arthur Scott. There were just lots of great faculty that we all were influenced by that based just on the human condition aren't with us anymore. I hope Matt will say something about Mark Cope because I've thought about him when the reunion started, but I know very little about his later life after Reed. And I don't know if Matt, do you know or?
Yes, embarrassingly enough, he became a insurance company lawyer representing the insurance companies in San Francisco against people who filed claims.
Oh dear.
But he was very good at it. Except for the people who, lost legs that never got settlements and things like that. He had a long-term successful relationship or marriage with Todd Snow, whom he met in the Bay Area. He was a civil servant in the U.S. Forest Service. And considering how unhappy Mark was before he came to Reed, and perhaps unappreciated by his immediate family, Reed was especially important for him. We were roommates freshman year, and that was because we had met at a high school performing arts summer camp in 1966 at Washington State University, and found that we were both applying to Reed. So we agreed then that if we both got in, we would become roommates, which I'm very happy that happened. I think the amazing thing about him also was how quickly, having studied classics and Latin and Greek with Frederick Peachy, another faculty member were remembering, Mark then proceeded to enroll in the Russian classes with Mrs. Krivoshein and picked that up. So he was a brilliant guy. And for his early death was related to an inherited medical condition that may have made him more susceptible to the lung cancer that killed him eventually.
Thanks, Matt.
Oh,
Here.
Scott, you're
Here,
muted there.
I got it. Okay. Does everybody know the order they're appearing in the grid? Because Steve, you're after Ann. And then Janet, Alan.
Everybody has a different order, Scott.
Yeah. Unfortunately, what you
Well,
can just
then
tell,
we'll go
us.
Yeah, we'll go by my order.
Can
and that means
I just
Ann
ask one? Excuse me. Can I ask, like Patty? I assume you're Patty McCrae.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask people if you don't have your whole name and your class year on your little square? Could you say who you are? Because I don't know who Tim is.
Oh, sorry. This is Tim and I are married. This is Tim Rowan, also class of 71. I just introduced him. He's my husband. He's been my husband for a long time.
I was one of those weird people who switched midstream from the science track of Phys Chem 120 and Math 210 and all that stuff over to the social sciences and political science halfway through. And it was very interesting. I don't want to go into great depth about this, but I didn't graduate in 4 years like a lot of us, I would assume. I think I did in 6 without having been there the whole time. I went back and earned money because I was on scholarship, and at the end of that, you don't get scholarship. So I earned the money and came back, and Don McRae was very helpful in getting me back on track and writing a thesis and able to then graduate. And somewhere in there, I got back together with Patty, who I had known at Reed, but we weren't together.
Okay, Ann Squire.
Yes.
Do you have anybody you want to talk about, or you don't have to? Anybody hear? Ann, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, just loud
Now
and
we
clear.
can.
Now I can. Now we can.
I am here largely because Doug Fenner had intended to be part of this group and suggested that I come on just as a listener, and that's why I'm here. So,
Well, then we'll let you listen.
and Doug is not here, so.
Okay. Well, you know what's interesting? I told you I was going to go by the order in the grid. It keeps changing. So this is really fun. So Alan Ridley, who's just about to sit down, is
So
actually.
can I say something?
No, I already sat down.
So anybody whose microphone is on is near the top of the grid, and everybody whose microphone is off is farther down. Beyond that, I have no idea how it decides what the order is, but as soon as your microphone is off, you jump up to the top.
Hey, so Scott, what class were you in?
71.
71. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
just
were all there together.
I was
Matt,
I was elected to the
Yeah.
Senate, and I was on
good.
the
It's
grid.
good. Everything's good. Matt, it's I remember you, and I remember Neil Vance. Neil, are you still there? There you are. Hey, Neil, you've changed after 50 years. But anyway, good.
I
good to see
assume
you again.
everybody's changed after 50 years, Alan.
Yeah, yeah. No, I haven't changed at all. I'm the same person. No, but I do have a lot less hair. But I wanted to remember, and it's good to see you, Susan and Mark, our teammates for the class reunion of 1970. And I wanted to mention that I remember Tim Custer very well also. And I think he added a lot of diversity to our class. And I also wanted to mention Paul Sikora, who was probably one of my early friends in my freshman year. And he was a spirited soul, very likable person, outgoing and cheerful. And he taught me how to sail. We went out on the Columbia sailing. It was, it was a great adventure. And then he wrote a thesis about, I guess, the architecture on campus at Reed. And then I also met him again. My wife and I met him in Seattle, and he was very hospitable to us. And I'm going to miss him along with a lot of the other people. I just wanted to mention Mason Druckmann. Does anyone remember him?
Sure.
He was put on our list, and I think he moved to New Zealand. I was hoping to connect with Suzanne Snively about his career after Reed and what he did. But anyway, he was an interesting, wonderful person as well.
I do want to share one Paul Sikora story. He
Okay.
had been in Africa working on a construction project in what is now, I think, Burkina Faso, but at the time was called Upper Volta. And he suffered an injury to his leg at the time that was quite a wound and a gash. And because it was so hot and humid, there was a real danger of it developing into, something like gangrene.
Yeah.
So it was a Dutch company that owned the construction project. And he went to them and sought help. And they said, oh, no problem. And they handed him a 6-pack of Heineken beer. 3 days later, the wound had completely healed.
Say, Carrie, Do I have the power to mute people so
Don't-
they can't?
Don't let the pharmaceutical companies find out about Heineken beer.
I
They
know.
don't wanna know about that.
It's therapeutic.
That's interesting. Well, I had no idea he had gone to Africa.
He was an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's ask Steve Buck he wants to remember. You're on mute, Steve. There
Okay,
you
here
go.
we go. Oh my, well, in looking at the list, I'm taken back first to freshman year when we actually, over the years, lost quite a number of people who were in my dorm, which I believe was Coleman that year. Sean Ames, Steve Dressler, Peter Goldstein. He was not really our, well, anyway, he had been there a while already, and he was my roommate for the second half of the year, which of course was very interesting. And unfortunately, drugs got him that summer, and as happened with a number of people back then. I think of the people I've mentioned, I certainly knew Sean and Steve Dressler the best, and they went on to stellar careers in academia and research, and were taken far too early. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Leslie Squire, who's not on our list, of course, but he certainly had an influence over quite everybody who went through the Reed Psychology Department, not just in our years, but for some decades. And he was certainly personally very kind, generous, tolerant, patient beyond what he should have been, I suspect, with my youthful foibles.
Thank you, Steve.
So yes, I, among other things, got to know Anne reasonably well because we spent a summer on Oahu, supposedly doing research. Sometimes got off the beach too, but and that was a wonderful NSF-sponsored program that both Bill Wiest, who I should acknowledge as well, and Les Squire ran through the Oceanic Institute at Sea Life Park. So,
Okay, Janet, you're on mute. Unmute yourself. You're click your little.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay,
There you go. We're good.
I just wanted to listen in, really. I love reading Read magazine when it comes. I always want to see the in memoriam parts of things. I enjoy so much hearing from you folks and also reading those to learn more about people who I recognize or whose names I recognize, or especially some of the follow-up things that people did after Read. So it's just, and I also like to give a kind of a thoughts and a nod to people whose names I recognize on the list and think about some of these people, like Peter Goldstein.
Thank you for mentioning Peter Goldstein. People forget that he and Bob Shell were running the film board. And all the great European films that we saw freshman and sophomore year were thanks to Goldstein and Bob Shell setting all that up before Peter's untimely death from a heroin overdose that following summer.
Yeah, I remember Bob Shell quite well. I used to be the projectionist for a lot of those films.
Yeah.
And I developed quite a skill as a 35 millimeter projectionist. Unfortunately, I didn't have a great career in that area because it was taken over by other technologies. But anyway, there it was. At least I have some skill that I developed at Reed. And I could still use it. I could probably thread a 35 millimeter film faster than any of you. But, unfortunately, it's not a great
Yeah, and it's important to think about Bob Shell because with skills like that, it was very easy for him to become a brain surgeon.
He became a brain surgeon?
Yes.
Oh my God, I missed my calling.
Well, you could have run for president, couldn't you?
You
Um,
know, can I jump in? I just realized that we didn't mention Daniel Becker.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Dan and I went to high school together, although he was 2 years ahead of me. And we were, when I was a freshman in high school, he and I were in a play together. And Daniel, unlike me, continued to be in the arts throughout his life, even though it was not an easy time for him. He sang in the San Francisco Opera, I believe, as a chorus member. And he was an old buddy, you know, he was like somebody that, you know, we were just pals for a long time. And I think he was a roommate of Richard Kennon's at some point too at Reed. And I mean, Richard was another person that we knew, and he, you know, sadly his career was cut short. It could have been.
That's very important that you mentioned Richard Kennon, because when you think of the American Studies program with John Tomsich, Richard Kennon, who later went on to Magdalen College, Oxford, where I visited him and where I was inspired to go to graduate school at Oxford afterwards, he became the author of what is still considered the definitive book on the American exiles who moved to Britain in the late 19th and early 20th century. It was called something like Return to Albion.
Oh, yeah, right.
But that, along with Daniel Becker, those were two important losses. And I also want to add Jackie Kohler,
I was going to talk about Jackie.
theater department.
Mad Woman of Chaillot, she directed.
That's right. That's right. And she also appeared in some of the Greek tragedies that Seth Ullman directed.
And she was known as the Queen of Lower Commons my freshman year.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She was a very good poker player.
That's right. That was her downfall.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'm bothered because I recognize people I know, but I don't remember how I know them. It's very frustrating. And Alan, you're next on our.
Okay, thanks. Hey, could I ask folks who aren't talking to mute? It will be easier to hear if you do. That's you, Matt. Anyway, I was going to talk about Sam Bush, who was my roommate freshman year in college, and then we had a house in Selwood with Craig Reed and Mark Pomerantz, and I stayed in touch with him. He was my best friend for years until he died in 2009, kind of early from multiple sclerosis. Sam wasn't really a scholarly type. What he was a craftsman. He was a woodworker. He built the dog fountain outside the library. He built the display cases in the library at Reed. Actually, can I share a screen? I actually got a couple of pictures out. So let's see if it will let me do this.
I can give you the power, Alan.
All right, if you would.
See if that.
Okay, so is that working? So anyway, there's his obituary in the Reed magazine, and Sam working on the drinking fountain outside the library. And then just as two other quick pictures, let's see, here's a picture from the memorial we had for him in Selwood Park, some pictures of Sam down at the bottom there. And then just finally, as a kind of a personal item, let's see. This is a antique phonograph I traded for some statue from somebody at, I don't know, after a poker game at Reed anyway. But Sam very carefully and thoroughly restored it, so it's really a work of art. Anyway, he was a wonderful person, and I certainly miss him to this day.
I wanted to mention just a tidbit about Mark Pomerantz. He and I visited Victor Rosenblum, at that time the former president of Reed, at Northwestern School of Law the year after we graduated. And Professor Rosenblum was very happy to take us to lunch and show us off to his colleagues, and he said, "This is two of our students from Reed, and Mark just got back from a year in Israel, and Alan just got back from a year in Yugoslavia." So we became world travelers after and students after we graduated from Reed. It was quite an experience.
He wasn't president of the college very long.
2 years.
Yeah, when he was moved in, me and another kid who I don't remember, we painted his house. The artist painted his house. Okay, Nancy. Yeah, unmute yourself there.
Which Nancy?
You.
Nancy Hunt? Or
I
no,
sent
Nancy
you
Neat?
I sent you a chat.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to mention Roger Johnston. I don't know how many of you remember Roger, but thank you. And Anne may recall him as well. Roger and I, back in the day, were student members for Reed from the fledgling Oregon Environmental Council. And I had my mom's old '63 Volkswagen Bug at Reed. And he and I every month would drive down to Salem to the meetings at the Oregon Environmental Council, which I subsequently discovered was only formed in 1968 from a bunch of interested environmentalists, fledgling environmentalists like ourselves. And we would represent the college. And the idea was that they had people from all sorts of environmental organizations who wanted to see big changes in the environment. And we would take back petitions and, the word to our constituents. In this case, it was Reed students. And Roger set up a litter patrol on campus to clean things up environmentally. And I used to do bulletin boards in the hallways in the Elliott Hall. And I remember, in fact, I found the other day, Anne, a note from you thanking me for I think it was either some environmental thing or a ZPG bulletin board that I had done there to inform everyone. I don't know. I know he went on to do lots more things environmental. He worked with the Forest Service for many years. I think he even was involved in some congressional hearings. Apparently, eventually he set up his own sea kayak business. And I remember him fondly. So let me just add, because Scott, you had mentioned Frankie wanted to be here, and I spoke to Frankie for about an hour the other day. I live in San Francisco. Now she lives in Oakland, and we've been trying to get together for a long time. And her grandsons, one of her two grandsons, middle school graduation is now. So she wasn't able to attend. But I think maybe she'll post some things to the.
She was Jan's roommate.
Yes.
You made me think of Dorothy, faculty member Dorothy Johansson. I don't know how many of you knew her. I was in American Studies, and I'll tell you the important thing I learned from her was that I wasn't going to graduate school in American History or American Study. But she liked me, but anyway. Mark McLean, you gotta unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm going through the list here, and I also remember Peter Goldstein and Steve Dressler would get into these. I think it was some kind of goof off role playing where they'd kind of because Steve was kind of this blonde, blue-eyed sort of guy, and he'd get into these weird discussions with Peter, and say, which would include comments like, "Well, now you're not the master race, and back and forth and back and forth. It was, I don't know, they had their own little space where jokes that would just absolutely go nowhere anyplace else, and they chased that around. And I don't know what they were up to, and I didn't know whether to be amazed or horrified. But they had this thing they chased around every once in a while. I remember Dorothy Johansson, who when I moved off campus, lived pretty close to, and just one or two. Well, we were then in what for a while was the Yellow House, and Reed finally got a hold of it, and I got careless with some project in the basement, took a big chunk out of my finger, and I said, "Well, I don't, maybe head down to the infirmary. Maybe they've got something." And she, spotted me, headed down the what I guess is the Psyche path, which is unpaved off street path that went down to the east parking lot, and she could see that I was had some problems. Said, "Hey, get in here, you need a Band-Aid or something." So she patched me up. I remember a lot of conversations in the closet, which was the room off of the chapel where she had her office, and they just talked about quite a bit of stuff. Let's see. I've got to go over here and bring up the list. My brain has about a 1K buffer allocated for names and faces. Occasionally I need a kind of a nudge here. Here we go. And let's see, Martha Downs, I remember some because I believe she was a physics major. And even though I moved on to be a music major for a year, which was, well, it kind of made sense if, but then I wound up as a psych major, and I just wound up talking to Martha now and again, because somewhere way down deep, I was still a physics major. But let's see, Paul Sikora, I do, and it may not be an accurate memory, but when my first day on campus, I went over, moved into Sisson, which is no longer there, but and then went over to Oregon Laundry and Linen Supply to pick up the linen and stuff, and then found myself in the quad, where there were some rather odd projects going on, including some wooden park benches that someone had either found or built, I think found. And there were a bunch of us wound up doing like pointillist art, hippie art all over these things. And those remained on campus for a very long time in various semi-obscure locations. When I got tired of that, because my arm was kind of drop off, walked past what is now the Paradox. It was now the it was then the Music Listening Library. It had a not only a super sound system, but in the middle, suspended from the ceiling, was a football-sized or stadium-sized PA speaker, like a big, looked like a huge trumpet. And there was a table right under it, and somebody was sitting cross-legged on the table with his head just about inside that trumpet, listening to Andy Warhol's the first Velvet Underground album, played at pretty much top volume. And I looked in there and I thought, whoa. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be educated by crazy people. How nice. You learn so much more that way. And it is my memory, which may not be accurate, but I always thought that was Paul Sikora, who was sitting on the table. So that was.
So Cheryl, you're going to be next, but we only get a half hour more, I guess, before they cut us off. Is that right, Carrie? And we obviously have way too much to remember. So try to be quick and remember somebody new. That's not your fault. Cheryl, there you go.
That's so. It doesn't show my year. I entered with the class of '71, and took a little time out to work and graduated in 72. So I identify with both classes, although I noticed here there was more of the 71 that I could identify with than my graduating class. But what I really, two people who stood out on the list for me are people I met in other classes that were earlier than mine. Susan Deary, because she was always very welcoming for those in the, she was involved in the, what do we call it? The outdoor, with the climbing and the events out at.
It was like the Outdoors Club.
Outdoors, yeah, I was thinking that was a little generic, but I guess maybe it was just the Outdoors Club, yeah. And so I remember when I read in the alumni magazine that she had passed quite a long time ago, I believe. It felt like a loss because it was somebody that I interacted with in those years and it made a difference. And another one is Paula Sikora, who I only met at the Reed's big centennial, was it centennial, bicentennial reunion? And we had great conversation and I was looking so forward to seeing him at a future reunion because he was just getting ready or in the process of retiring and talking about what he was looking to do and thinking about directions and change, and was just a friendly person.
Okay, Susan, I forgot to warn you that you're next. You're on mute too.
Scott,
Yeah. Which Susan?
You.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's really good to see people. I remember many of you. It's really cool. My first remark is very quick. I'll just say that I now am with a lovely man who was at MIT for 7 years for undergrad and grad. So sometimes I read his alumni mags. And I have to say that the obituary pages for MIT are really different from the ones for Reed. The emphasis is really different. At MIT, it's on achievement. And at Reed, it's on whatever, So I just wanted to say that. It was really striking to me. The people that I remember Professor McCrae, who was a real gentleman, and he was my Hume advisor, or my Hume conference leader. And Len Logan, I have to talk about Len Logan. Len he lived in the same dorm as my then boyfriend, Jim McConnell, which was Chittick. And Len was what we called straight at that time. In other words, he had really short hair. He wore button-down shirts. He just was like a throwback to the 50s. But he didn't seem like he felt out of place, and he had a really great sense of humor, and he made me laugh a lot. And I was really sad to hear that he had passed away. I also knew Tim Custer, who was really an unusual guy at Reed, having been in the Marines. He's very buff, short hair, and I guess maybe Scott, you said he had a family already or something. I don't know.
Yeah, wife and a child. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he sticks in my memory. He was also in that dorm, I think.
Jim Custer was someone that I actually worked with after I graduated from Reed we had the Multnomah Washington CETA program where we were out building trails with underprivileged young people. And he was the guy that came and introduced us all to, these downtrodden young men and women who needed a lift up and all their terrible problems that we were going to overcome by having them out in the forest working. And oh my goodness, he developed a reputation in our program in sort of like 3 weeks. Everybody was like, oh, Tim Custer. Oh yeah, we all know about him. He was a very interesting person, a real rabble rouser. And
yeah, and he stood out at Reed because he was also sort of straight.
Yeah,
at least
and I didn't know him at Reed.
At least on the surface.
Yeah,
I drank a lot
going on inside him. And then the last person I want to mention, I barely knew, but she died of COVID, Luria Pell. And I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Mark, by the way, my grid shifted, so I'm completely confused now. But Mark, you're next. Mark McLean.
Mark McLean already went.
You did?
Yeah.
That shows how I'm doing. Jeff Baldwin. Is he gone?
No, well, he's on mute. And Jeff, can
Yes,
you
he
unmute
is.
yourself? There we go.
They shifted my grid.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Barely.
Barely. I can't do much about. Oh, my microphone is hiding around the corner. That's part of it. So what's your
Scott, maybe you
question?
could go to somebody else while he's getting his.
Okay.
Yeah,
together.
I'm just a lurker, really. I wasn't planning on saying anything.
Okay. Hey, Beverly, you're a rock climber. You can talk next.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Scott. And it's been great to hear from all of you about a lot of people. I have a few people in mind to talk about. I want to really thank Patty for mentioning faculty. And Fred Ayers basically died while we were there. I actually never had a class from him, but talk about climbers, he was amazing. I am continuing to be, last time I was in Portland, I visited his widow, Angela. She still lives down the street from the college. And their son, Freddie, who was maybe 4 at that time, he's gone on to become a university professor, I think, in something. And I don't recall what. Angela told me that about 5 or 10 years ago. But he's Fred Ayers Jr. and you know, he's continuing, and I think Angela did not have a great time after Fred died, but Fred's legacy, both in climbing and in chemistry, and I think with respect to the Reed reactor that he was critical in getting, whereas, you know, it's been really phenomenal. The second person, you know, somebody brought up Dorothy Johansson, and you did, Scott, and you know, she actually was amazing. I took her Pacific Northwest history. So I started out, I'm a chemistry and physics major, and I got all my gen ed stuff out of the way as fast as I could. But then I started taking more courses because they sounded interesting. And so I took Russian history and philosophy of science and minority groups and 2 German literature courses and on and on. But basically, I decided my senior year, I think, to take Pacific Northwest history, which met in the chapel, I think, right next to her office. And what she did, she gave everybody either a D or F when the midterm grades go in. So everybody in that class, and many of them for the very first time, gets this little pink slip in their mailbox. And I guess if you got a D, you felt good. But we all had to go talk to her, and she basically said, like, nobody has to take my course. Even though you don't have to take it, you've got to take it seriously. And, you know, I just wanted to talk face to face with every one of you, so you all get this pink slip in your, that was the first one I'd ever gotten. My grades weren't stellar, but, you know, that is a good technique if you want to get students' attention. And I considerably enjoyed that course. I've now taken Montana geology just a couple of years ago. And so I try to learn a little bit about where I'm located. And I'm located right now in Montana, though today I'm sitting in Orinda, California. So it's nice to hear about all the people that are living in the Bay Area. Montana is a little more lonely. However, Montana, and I didn't realize this, but Fred Rigby and his wife and family had moved to Montana, I'm guessing somewhere but on the order of a dozen years ago, and Fred retired more or less from the consulting he was doing. He's in the class of 70, and was a physics and math major who in fact completed with the class of 71 because he discovered when he was about to turn in his math thesis that somebody had already published it, and therefore it wasn't acceptable to turn it in as his Reed math thesis. So he spent the summer writing a new thesis on a new problem that nobody had published yet. when he died in April of 2020, not of COVID. He had a stroke sitting in the downstairs sort of rec area of his really amazing mountain home outside of Helena. And after he died, his wife called me. I guess at that point her name is Susan Lupton. She did not go to Reed. And she called us to let us know he died. He wouldn't let her contact us before he was dead because I guess he didn't want to get together. I remember some backpacking trips maybe 15 years ago with him near Mount Adams. You know, remarkable guy. He had 3 daughters. One of them is at Oberlin. One of them, I think, right now is in Seattle working. She got her bachelor's degree in chemistry or something.
Bev, there's going to be a separate program where we can brag about our children and talk about
Yes.
our health problems. But we got to talk about dead people right now.
Yeah, so I want to mention Martha Downs because she did die. We were students, and that was really a shock. One interesting thing nobody probably knows, Martha and I played on in an intercollegiate men's soccer game because the team had scheduled 2 games at the same time. They didn't have enough players. And so Martha and I went and played University of Portland, which was a non-league game, to the great upset of their cheerleaders who didn't like us bumping into their boyfriends, as you can imagine. And Susan Deary died only a year after she graduated in an avalanche on Mount St. Elias, I think in Alaska. That was a shock. It was a great loss. Her family continued being part of many Reed alumni. And her grandfather, by the way, a physicist at Oberlin, he died on Forsyth Glacier of Mount St. Helens, climbing years and years ago. That's Michael Freeman. I noticed he had died. He's in the class of 72. He started out with us. He was a physics major. What amazed me about him is that he was blind, and he did just as well as the rest of us. I couldn't figure out how he could follow those amazing lectures, those complicated lectures, being blind, and I don't know anything about him since Reed. But he's definitely worth mentioning for that amazing accomplishment.
Okay, well, Patricia Dressler, I've told us she's next. She's on mute. You have to get good at unmuting yourself.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how moving it is to hear people talking about Steve. We got married right after graduation, so in 71. And he went on and got a medical degree at OHSU in Portland. And then he decided that he really wanted to go into research. So he did a master's just to kind of fill in a year until he got into a pathology program. And he did the pathology program and a PhD at Washington University in St. Louis, and then was on the faculty, and was not touching. His research was in DNA repair and RNA, and his department chairman said, "Oh, it's not going to go anywhere. You should change your topic." And but he was sticking with it, and to see that people he knew and corresponded with in the early days got the Nobel Prize 3 years ago. And all the things, all the words, even though I'm not a scientist, all the words that I heard all the time are just blabbed in the news all the time now. So I just feel like it wasn't just a personal loss, but a real loss to science that he was cut down at the age of 39. So thank you for all the reminiscence. And yes, his relationship with Peter Goldstein was very strange, and with lots of other people. He was a really amazing person. He was voted Teacher of the Year at the medical school, and a really big endowment was set up after he died for the graduating medical student that shows the not only proficiency in medicine, but more importantly, humanitarian and volunteerism. And I've been lucky to meet a lot of those students, and that's what he was. He did so much outside of the lab and what he needed to do for his career. He did a lot of humanitarian things, and I really appreciate it so much that so many people remember him, because he was completely special to me. Thank you.
Okay, so we got 7 minutes left, and I can't remember who I've called on anymore. But Doug Fenner, have you talked? Have you got a chance to talk? Doug? Douglas
You're muted.
Fenner? Oh, shit. I'm muted? Whoops.
Oh, Doug
Sorry
is
about that.
muted.
Oh, Doug is muted. Now I've lost my
Doug,
picture.
Doug Fenner, I remember you.
Oh,
There we go.
Oh,
There he goes. Fenner.
thanks. Yeah, I guess I'll remember three faculty briefly. Fred Courts was in the psych department. He was older. He was teaching statistics, and he passed away one graduation. And apparently he was putting on his gown for graduation when a heart attack took him.
Oh.
And then two faculty that were quite good to me, Squire and Bill Weiss, excuse me. And Les Squire was a wonderful man. He was very supportive of students, I would say. Very reasonable, very low key. I can remember exactly what the distinctive way he used to talk, and he loved puns. And he was, he got interested at one point in different species and trying to compare intelligence. And he and Bill Weiss both had an interest in trying to show that one thing was wrong, that fish could actually do this one thing. And they got National Science Foundation grant to study it, and did it in Hawaii. As later on, Les did it at Reed, and he used these fish that are relatively large fish from the Amazon that you can get in aquarium shops called Oscars.
Yep.
And he was doing it in the basement of the drama building, the theater building, the old theater building. And he actually got them to do it. They were as smart as humans with that. Then the theater building burned down, and we couldn't even, I don't remember if we even found the frames of the aquariums. There was nothing left. But he was a wonderful man.
Okay, we have time for one more person, and Laurel Waters. Laurel Waters, I think, has been waiting the longest. A better host would have got it in with an hour, but some of you old people talk very slowly. So
You're muted, Laurel. There you go.
there we go.
Hi, everybody. I don't offhand know anybody who's died recently. I had to come in late. I was busy with something else, so I've missed most of the stories, but I'm glad to see that it was recorded. And I wish that I'm doing it on the phone, so I can't see everybody. And I wish I knew who all was there. Maybe I'll run down to my computer if you're going to stay on for a few minutes. Is everybody on the Zoom so I could see who all was there?
Yeah, they're going to kick us off in a couple minutes.
Right. I'm running downstairs. What, does anybody else have anything to say? Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I could say some more.
Yeah,
If I mean, do I have to talk about people who have died?
Yes.
Right. And then
Because
that's
this is a memorial.
It's a memorial.
Scott,
I mean,
I
I could
just want
talk
to
about
say
people who are
really,
alive.
can I say something really quickly? This is Patty. I just want to
Okay.
celebrate the fact that there are so many of us that didn't die. I mean, sometimes I'm kind of surprised by that. It's like, we're doing okay. And I'm so lucky that so many of the people that I was actually close to at Reed are with us still and happy and doing wonderful things. So there's this for
Everybody.
us, right?
Here, here.
Right. I did want to mention something for myself. I'm just becoming the national president of the American Medical Women's Association, AMWA. I'm presently president-elect, and the email AMWA, AMWA-.org. I don't know if there's any other women physicians out there, but if there are, please contact me. And as I said, I just got to the computer, so I just have to turn it on if we have a.
We're gonna get kicked off.
Yeah, we're gonna get kicked off in 60 seconds. I can't even read my script.
While
Thank you,
she's
everybody.
While she's
Thank
turning
you.
her computer on, I want to invite everyone to the Class of 70 event, which is a week from today in the afternoon. You can go on the platform and check it out. We're going to have an interesting panel about civil rights and related issues these days, and then we're going to just have a chat. So please come.
And we're going to have Ellen Rosenberg, the AG, say a few words. So thank you, everybody.
And it was great to see everybody.
Wonderful to see you all.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you all for being
Yeah,
here.
thanks,
It's
Carrie.
lovely to see you.
Laura, do you get medical advice? How about some free medical advice from Laura?
Yeah.
Oh, free medical advice.
Hey, we're
I
not
should
cut
that
off
I'm a
yet. That's exciting.
psychologist, so you might not want my advice.
You never know. You
No, I
never
do
know.
feel, and I'm also not used to doing Zoom on the computer, so this is being not in my normal Zoom environment.
Well, goodbye, everybody, because
We're almost
seconds away
Oh,
from.
no, I went the wrong
We
way.
haven't been cut off yet. We could
Yeah, we haven't
storm
been
the
cut off
Zoom
yet.
room.
I'd like to acknowledge Dorothy Johansson for helping me on my thesis. She found me, and I was doing a thesis on water resource management. She asked me about groundwater, and I had no idea. I didn't know anything about groundwater, so I got an education from her right walking out around in front of Elliott Hall. Thank you, Dorothy Johansson, and thank you all of you again.
It was wonderful to see you all on behalf of Alumni Programs and Annual Fund. We're so happy to see you here. Thank you for sharing all of these very, very poignant and delightful, I think, memories of your classmates and faculty and friends. And we'll hope to see you this afternoon. We do have another class of 1971 50th event, the book talk with Gal Beckerman coming up at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So join us for that if you have time, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie.
Good, Archie.